Hello, sir. Good evening.
Sir,
Yeah, good evening to all.
good evening, sir.
Sir, good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening.
Namaskaram.
Namaskara, sir. Namaskara.
Namaskaram.
Nandasubramaniam, Manakam.
Yeah.
Welcome, sir.
Subramaniam.
Welcome, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir. Professor Payanad, sir.
Yeah.
Namaskaram.
And
Dear.
yeah, good evening to all the participants, dear friends. Shamala, good evening. Yesterday we are not seen. So my request to all the participants is don't give this connection to outsiders, as we have taken a lot of efforts, to select you. So it is not meant for people who are coming casually. So some people are coming in casually. There are 1 or 2%. So I request you don't give this connection to I think anyone. If they are interested, let them join in the what we call YouTube connection. We have YouTube who can give that connection. It is for casual, but this is for people who join and who are attending regularly. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think it's then 7 o'clock. I request all the participants. Is there Sujan Kumar there? Sir, who else? Okay, 1 minute, 1 minute. Jisha, Geeta, Himanshi, Hyambadu, the Professor Samala.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Anything, sir? Hello? Hello?
The Professor Samala, you can invite the Professor Y.S. Sudhakar Reddy and also Professor Chelli Perumal for today's talk. So you please take care of. I have some internet problem. Please. I request Samla to invite Professor Sudhakar Reddy now. At the first Sudhakar Reddy or Chelli Perumal?
Chella Perumal is taking. Chella Perumal.
Okay, ma. You invite, it is left to them. So you invite Professor Chelli Perumal.
Yes. Good evening, one and all. I extend a warm welcome to all the scholars and also the participants to this session. On this occasion, I welcome Professor A. Chella Perumal, sir. Hello, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are very much audible.
Yes.
No problem.
Sir, I extend a warm welcome to Professor A. Chella Perumal, sir, to this session. I request him to take over the proceedings, sir. Over to Chella Perumal, sir.
Very good evening to you all who have assembled here for this workshop. I think we are on the 5th or 6th day. First of all, I convey my respects and gratitude to the organizers of this workshop, very interesting workshop. My dear Professor Bhaktachal Reddy Garu, dear Professor Raghavan Payanad sir, and my dear colleague Professor Sudhakar Reddy, and my dear friends Professor Kanda Subramaniam, Professor M. Venkatesha, Professor Shyamla, Professor Rajeshri, and so many friends. First of all, I thank the opportunity given to me both by the Institute of Folklore, Indian Institute of Folklore, puzzles, and also the organizing university, Dravidian University, performed. A very interesting exercise is going on for the past 1 week, revisiting and relocating folklore workshop. It is, folklore is at crossroads now. Folkloristics is at crossroads. Not only folklore and folkloristics, now because of the world situation, almost the life is in crossroads, life is in crisis, all the disciplines are in crisis. So many things are happening. Folklore and folkloristics is not exceptional. So that too, the discussion, the theme of the workshop, rightly taken in a right time by the organization, Fossils organization, which is a premier organization in India for the study of folklore, for giving training in folklore to the scholars, young and old. And that too, now we are facing a situation that in the established countries, folklore departments are closing down. And some of the countries where folklore was emerging very fast, suddenly they are facing some setback. So many things are there. That is organizational things and all. I do not want to go into it. But coming to the workshop, which is going on now, Professor Payanaud as a lead speaker, as an important resource person, was doing wonderfully good job, tirelessly doing good job. And all these days, he has elaborated and highlighted the nature of folklore and folkloristics in the realm of the field of knowledge, not only in the field of knowledge, not only from the epistemological point of view, and also from the point of view of the world happenings. It's such a comprehensive view. He is trying his level best to train the scholars, not only to train the scholars, even to make understand, to make a deep thinking. He is really doing a good job. And I am also following from the day one, not only following, and I'm having the opportunity of contributing in this workshop in selecting the participant and other things. And I also follow every day the lectures. Not only merely I follow the lectures, I follow the discussion. Not only merely follow the discussion, and all the participants are sending their feedback, observation, because it was also one of the conditions put forth by the organizers. So I am reading the feedback of the participants, which are being sent to me, to the others also. Probably they are making copy to me. And I am extremely happy. I was having a little bit of skepticism when the workshop was going on, because Professor Payanaud is speaking in a little higher level, not only little higher level, epistemological level, philosophical level, theoretical level, and not only is he was speaking all these days folklore, folklore in relation to the others. So, considering the nature of the participants, I was a little bit skeptical whether it would reach all the participants. Okay, senior scholars are okay, or those who are in the field, okay, they will catch it up. But there are so many new faces, young scholars, young teachers. They have come here. Will it be possible for them to catch up? But I'm extremely happy after reading the observations. Every day they are sending, every day I'm reading, and they are really doing marvelous job. Which what I want to say that they are able to they understand the concepts and theories or whatever Professor Payanaud speaks. they fully grasp. That is, I'm extremely happy about it. I was not expecting that. Really, even young scholar and also senior scholars, all are grasping it fully well. So in this way, the whatever Professor Payinard speaks doesn't go simply airy, simply it doesn't go off. It all are being received in an appropriate manner. So it is very good. So that point, the earlier skepticism I had, I now withdraw that skepticism. Appropriately, it is reaching. And another interesting thing, these participants all are very active in folklore research, and they will be active in folklore research and teaching. The field of folklore, I also find there is going to be a good resurgence in the coming days to come, because of the kind of participants and the kind of interest they show, and also the kind of commitment they show. It is not a joke every day sitting here in the evenings continuously for 2 hours, attending to it, responding to it. It all shows clear-cut commitment. And not only that, so the nearly more than nearly 30 participants are attending through Zoom, and several others are seeing through YouTube. So which means very good, what to say, the reach it is happening. Then come to the point which what I am making. There was a little confusion what to talk by the two resource persons who have been assigned today to do the job, and also there will be one more resource person will be coming little later. And for that also, when we heard the informal discussion with the organizers, we got the idea, and Professor Payinard himself told, okay, you can talk about what I was telling all these days in a summatic manner, in a summary manner. Not only summary manner, even you can, if you want, you can even criticize. All this liberty has given. And another interesting thing, the organization of the workshop, I also want to make a point. Till yesterday, it was the general overview. Really speaking, you are going to have deep, direct implications of folklore. From tomorrow onwards, Professor Payinard will be doing it. So for to start that thing, to have a proper, appropriate beginning or appropriate way. Today it is a slight what to say, slight recap. I would say it is a recap. See, for example, if you are traveling for a long distance, if you are traveling from one place to other, if it is about several hundred kilometers, some point of time your vehicle will be stopped for refreshment or other things. It is like that, because Professor Payinard is taking all of us in a very long journey, long route for a great destination. So you all of us require some kind of gap in between. In the long travel, you have to stop the vehicle for a while, refresh yourself, and then restart. Probably you will be restarted tomorrow. So that refreshment, recap, and summarizing I will be doing now. And again I say, I will not be able to do whole summary, everything together, but what is coming into my mind, I will share a few points. Not that what all he has covered, I will be summarizing or I will be making an abstract now, not at all. Only as glimpses, some points to which I am attracted, or some point to which things which come to my mind only, I am going to touch upon. Because you have heard fully, but I only want to remind you that what he has done this thing, and also after me, Professor Sudhakar Reddy will be doing the job much elaborate, deeper manner. Okay, so my view, my presentation here would be touching upon a few points, or like a snippets I will be touching upon. Okay. What is that he discussed? One of the points he discussed very thoroughly, the locating the folkloristics, because folkloristics is now a discipline. It has become a subject. It has become a field of study. It has become a field of knowledge. Okay, if that is the case, where would you locate in the fields of knowledge, in the so many various fields of the studies are there? Where would you place folklore? Then that from that point he started his discussion whether you would include folkloristics as a discipline, whether you will put under the humanities as arts, or you would take them as a science or social sciences. That debate is started, or that discussion is started, because after all, folklore because folklore it is not just a theoretical discipline, because the content, the data for any discipline is very important. The kind of data what folklore uses, it is having a kind of artistic quality. That is the problem. That is the issue. Again, it is there is a difference when compared to the other social sciences and the folkloristics. The thing is, other social sciences generate data, whereas folklore need not have to generate data. Already data available as forms, already data available as genres, already data available as items. You get this point. This is very, very important point. Why is that? Why is that there is a confusion? Why is that there is a debate? So whether to include folklore and humanities or social sciences, because of this problem, not only what kind of data that folkloristics is using. All disciplines have to depend upon data, whether it is material data, natural data, or for even if it is cultural data. Take for example, anthropology generate data in the sense they go to the anthropologists go to the field, and from the life they observe by observation, by doing asking questions or interviewing or all the other things. They collect data, which means the data are available as live. Those things they generate as data, as street patterns or kinship patterns or kinship terms and all. They all exist in life. They decipher data. It was okay. This is political organization. This is a kind of leadership phenomenon they have. This is the kind of descendants they follow. This is the kind of lineage they do. All these things people practice, but they don't exist as concrete forms. Remember, this is very, very, very important. The data which would be used, which are used by the anthropologists, do not exist in discrete or concrete forms, whereas the folklorist data available as concrete forms, as genres, tale, proverb, myth, legend. Whether you collect it or not, whether you do research or not, they, they exist, because they are all forms. They are all forms which have content, function, everything. They are not only they are forms, not only they are genres, they are artistic in nature. That is the reason why even then Benamos go to the extent of defining folklore. Folklore is the artistic communication happening within a small group. Okay, so what I want to say, the folklore as data, artistic forms. So because they are having artistic value, that is the reason why even the question of intellectual property right, group ownership, community ownership, the knowledge. See, knowledge forms very often. Professor Pynard was very often using the knowledge system. The knowledge system. See, knowledge system doesn't exist in an invisible manner for folklore. It exists many a times in a visible, concrete, materialistic, artistic forms. So because they are artistic in nature, like literature, like many of the subject matters that are dealt by humanities, it is you have a confusion whether to put under the humanities. Okay, that is that. But you, if you are taking those artistic forms, the data, folklore data, only if you use as artistic forms, only for amusement or pleasure or for aesthetic things, it remains as art subject alone. But it is not happening like that. Folklore is also making our folkloristics is making the data as this subject matter for the studies. The folkloristics, because it is becoming a mature discipline, making the folklore data, whether it is artistic in nature or not, taking them for analysis, comparing them, but deriving from that, is there any patterns arrive out of it, or from one folklore with the other folklore, or what is happening to those folklore, whether they are migrating, whether they are developing, growing, or discarded, or new folklore emerging, or what is the function they are doing. All these so many questions of science, questions of human truth are asked, and for that the data is used. So that is the reason why folklore is viewed both from the point of view of humanities and also from the point of view of the science, social science. They see this is many times people sometimes in an elementary manner, because lore means lore belong to the humanities, folk belong to the social science. That is a mere very casual distinctions. I'm not denying that distinction, but the kind of point what I say, it is very important. What kind of data? It is because the data are artistic, so it is to be placed as humanities. The same artistic data are put into scientific rigorous analysis, so it is becoming a social sciences. So this debate very nicely is touched upon. Okay, one point. Then come to the other thing. Then in many of his presentations, he was relating, comparing folklore with the other disciplines. And in fact, yesterday or day before yesterday, I was highly impressed by the comparison he made between the folklore and the industry, the folk knowledge and the industry. So it was highly appreciable. Some kind of originality of Professor Fine Art was there. I was enjoying that very much. Not only that, she was not only comparing folklore with the industry, he was also comparing or touching upon the relationship between folkloristics with the other disciplines. Naturally, many a times he was comparing folklore with that of the anthropology. Let me come to that, the relationship between folkloristics and anthropology. I will come to it a little later. But he was comparing folklore in relation to history, folklore in relation to sociology, folklore in relation to even to the philosophy, all these things. Though he didn't say them in a categorical terms, but it is possible for us to keep a track to follow. And it is interestingly all these days, though not much not in a elaborate manner, we came for discussion, but as a observer, real observer, really I observed again, observation, not just to see. I mean, you should know, in anthropology, when you say observation, not just it means seeing or looking. Always, the literal meaning of observation is seeing or looking. But the actual, what we mean to understand as observation, putting into use of all your 5 sensory organs through which you gain knowledge, and not knowledge, the data or the information on which you are going to make a study. So that way, as a, though we were silent spectators, observers, but there was a ample opportunity of grasping all that Professor Pynard said. Okay, then definitely before closing, I will take specifically folklore in relation to anthropology, because I myself trained in anthropology, and I'm very much fascinated with anthropology because of my profession. But yes, as a second point, we discussed, the folklore in relation to the other disciplines. Then, very elaborately, he has taken folklore from the perspective of evolution. Evolution, as he was also comparing for the understanding the natural biological evolution with the cultural evolution. And because of the evolutionary theory, because of the evolutionary understanding, because of the evolutionary perspective only, the what is the kind of folklore is the folklore is facing the situation, the viewing of folklore by the other scholars, from the angle of the evolution. It has a very strong bearing on the respectability of the discipline. See, for example, he was discussing about the cultural evolution on the three stages of the savagery, barbarism, and civilization stage. And many a times, the earlier understanding of the folklore was as if they have evolved long before, when the cultures were in a very primitive condition, and they continue to exist even after that particular culture developed into a civilized manner. And what they continue as survivals. Those survivals are nothing but folklore, which means there is a wrong notion. But it was the first notion, it was the first assumption given on folklore by the scholars. So, if it, not only that survivals were of no use, or it is of no use to the community, to the culture. Yeah, and also it would cease to exist after some time. So if that is, so it is something like endangered remnants of culture. So you may not have to give importance. That was the first 19th century understanding of the folklore, which has a strong bearing. Even now, some people continue to have the same feeling, but it was rejected vehemently by the later anthropologists, or whoever put forward the evolutionary school of thought. Later, neo-evolutionism came, and the unilinear evolution was rejected. There is, you can't expect that uniform development of each and every culture to follow the same line, but so totally rejected. And not only rejected, the unilinear evolution was rejected, the very concept of survival was rejected. On the basis of some of the new theories like functionalism. You can't have anything as a survival in a culture, which means you can't have anything in the culture, or you can't, nothing exists without any function. So if it is something exists in the culture, it has something to do, whether to satisfy the need of the individual or to make the continuance of the culture, whatever it is, or social structure. So after the rejection of the survival school, or rejection of the survival, a new understanding of the relevance of the folklore was realized by later scholars. Then come to the another interesting thing. I enjoyed another point which Professor Pynard highlighted. Especially, he was giving a sequence. He was giving a sequence of folklore over a period of time. He was giving the about four stages, the kind of the understanding of folklore, or viewpoint of folklore during colonial period. What was the condition or respect or view of folklore during nation state period? what was the kind of folklore's understanding during industrialized period, and what is the approach on folklore during the globalization period. This is very wonderfully explained by Paina, especially the stage in the globalization period. We have to pay much attention. The participants assembled here should pay good attention to it, because we are now in a globalized situation, post-globalized situation. In this, what he said in his presentation, folklore during the globalization period, folklore is coming in contact with market economy. In the name of development and globalization, the paradigm of knowledge and the paradigm of industry are getting identical. The emphasis, this was only explaining, I think, yesterday, the industry and knowledge, parallelism of industry and knowledge. It is a wonderful paradigm he has highlighted. The emphasis on the holistic approach, not only in understanding the content, that is matter, but the form, genre itself, and stated how less we have explored in the trajectory of interconnected nature of genres within a particular culture to tell different sections of the same story. And also he said, in the globalization era, folklore is considered as a commodity. That is the crux of the issue. He was folklore. You started as what to say, some viewed as a survival, some viewed as an artistic product, and now the stage has come. It is a commodity. If it is a commodity, once it is become a commodity, then it is not in the hands of the common people. It is in the hands of the the business. It is in the hands of the those who are having the power, because for commodity would be used, sold. Only then you would have the consumer. See, once folklore is becoming a commodity, what is happening to the producer of the folklore? See the situation. Very pathetic situation, I would say. See, now, if you compare agriculture with folklore, you will very easily understand. Now, as long as agriculture was in the hands of the producers, as long as the agriculture was in the hands of the peasants or the producer, it was just a product. Once it has become a commodity, even the producer do not have any say over it. So like that, once folklore has become a commodity, the producer, one who sings or one who narrates or one who does or one who makes or one who dances, do not own at all, because it is becoming commodity. If you own, really what the correct development should have been this way. The folklore during the globalization period, after the too much of awareness, after the too much of industrialization, literacy, development, all what would have happened, we should have found out some ways and means so that the common intellectual property right like things should have been appropriately given to the community rights, as individuals have the intellectual property right, as if because it is something related to creativity. The individuals are enjoying the power, enjoying the money, enjoying the royalty. Community should have been given all these things in the name of IPR, whatever. But it didn't happen at all. It is still in the discussion level. Unfortunately, the traditional communities are not only losing their knowledge are being appropriated, and their wrong notions have been given to them, to say that what you have is nothing, useless, meaningless, discard it. If you keep that way, then people would, where would they do? They would feel shy See, instead of making the people to have the pride of their knowledge creations or knowledge creativities, you are demeaning them. What you have is nothing, useless. But at the same time, you find ways and means to make those knowledge convert it into commodity. Then, once something is being made as commodity, then where is the power of common man? Where is the power of then who holds it? Then who would dominate? That is happening. Those things have been very very nicely elaborated by Pioneer. And he was also telling the process of production of knowledge is parallel to the process of industry. And that is that. And another thing, so I have only 20 more minutes, so I will try to bring as many points as possible what all he said. And he has nicely given so many definitions, because definitions still matter in the study of folklore. Definitions matter. Not see, for any discipline, definition matters. Say, for example, folklore. The definition for folklore, there are hundreds of definitions. Hundreds of definitions. If you take Maria Leach dictionary itself, you would find nearly 100 definitions. And though there are hundreds of definitions, all those hundreds of definitions, you will not be using it. And at the most of the time, those definitions will be having some common points. And so you would pick up some important definitions and you will stick on to it, or you will find out what is the development later to that definition, something like that. So in that, couple of times he has touched upon Alan Dundee's definition. And interestingly, he was devoting his whole lectures for the rest for as a gratitude to Alan Dundee. So which means how much affection or how much respect he has had on Professor Alan Dundee. Now here, continuing, I also want to make one important point. I am reminded of Professor Alan Dundee in the lectures what Professor Pioneer is doing. See, he himself was mentioning in one of the lectures how the during the the late 80s and also in the early 90s, how the Ford Foundation trained the young Indian scholars, and one of the great grand resource persons was Professor Alan Dundee. Myself, Professor Pioneer, Professor Bhaktacharya, Professor Sudhakar Reddy, all even Makbul Islam, all were trained in a way or other by people like Alan Dundee. Why I am actually making a parallel between Alan Dundee and Raghavan Pioneer, because in the 30 days workshop where we attended, not only we attended, it was the workshop which I am part of the organized committee. I organized and attended in Kodaikanal during late 80s. For 30 days, every day, Professor Alan Dundee would come at 10 o'clock and give lectures continuously till 12 o'clock. Only in the some 5-10 minutes of gap, he will drink water during the time, whereas we all will go out, have coffee, tea, snacks, but he will never take anything. And it will be continued. So 2 hours continuously is to do. Same thing Professor Pioneer is doing. He is also not taking not giving break, not taking anything. In fact, people like me are finding it extremely difficult to continuously sit in front of the screen for 2 hours. Okay, there are so many young people are here, like Himanshi, Ruchirana, even Kanda Subramaniam, Pavitra. So many youngsters are here. You all used to sit in front of the screen for hours together. Whereas people like me, if we sit in front of the screen for some time, not only we become tired, our eyes are not having that much power. Okay, it is just for lighter when I said, like Pioneer, Dundee was doing continuous marathon lectures for 1 month. Professor Pioneer is doing it for 2 weeks. It is unimaginable. I can't do that. It is very difficult for me to do every day. Okay, once in a while you do. Every day we take class, that is different thing, 1 hour or 2 hours, but not at a stretch, not every day. Not even organizers are not making free even on Sunday, because it always when if a workshop is organized by Fazils, that too if it is supervised by Professor Bhaktha Chandreddy, then you have to be very strict. Because he is the student of Professor V. Subramaniam. Something he looks to me. I only heard about V. Subramaniam, but now I am not only now, always I am facing, or we are controlled by Professor Bhaktha Chandreddy in sincerity and strictness. Okay, it is just a lighter thing. What I am telling the definitions. So many definitions he has given, and importantly, he touched upon Alan Dundy's definition. Not only he touched upon Alan Dundy's definition, he has devoted the whole lecture series. If you remember the first day, first lecture, you can see he has mentioned that I devote all these lectures to Professor Alan Dundy. But I don't know whether he will be totally agreeing to the definitions of Alan Dundy. That is different thing. Okay. Then one day he was also making one another very interesting point. Very interesting point. Folklore folklore failed to achieve academic respectability. It's that is true. Even now, if you are in a college or university, if you say that I belong to folklore, you are viewed in a secondary manner. All social sciences are viewed by the scientists as if we are secondary citizens in that university. That is different thing. Then among the social sciences also, folkloristics is not having the desired respect. Now situations are improving, but wherever you face, he was even telling that even Alan Dundy was not respected in the academia as the other experts, as other anthropologists are were respected. For that also there is reasons. Sometimes sometimes just 1 minute. Many a times when Professor Painard makes points, he makes strong points. Sometimes he doesn't elaborate on that point, whereas he will be elaborating something else. Some of the parts, some of the points he is making us to interpret ourselves or to have our own readings. This is one of the point which he made. Why is that not having the why is that Alan Dundy was not that much respected? Why is that folklore failed to achieve the academic respectability? He didn't elaborate, but let me touch upon that. Because the very word somehow from the beginning, the term was somehow or other from the time of Victorian or from the 18th century time, or even from when the term was first introduced, from that time onwards also, that term was not, didn't get attraction. See, sometimes nowadays new terms are being coined, new terms, all this when it is coined, people are attracted towards those terms. Whether they understand the term fully or not, that is different thing. See, for example, in Tamil Nadu, if I say, there is a word in Tamil Nadu, people are very much attracted to, especially in the social sciences, especially those who are in the literature field or social science field, very much attracted with the term ethnography. In fact, I tell you, in Tamil Nadu, among the Tamil intelligentsia, the term anthropology is not that popular, whereas the term ethnography is very popular. I tell you, the Tamil people call ethnography as Ina Varaviyal, and Tamil anthropology is called Manidaviyal. Manidaviyal was not attracted. Some or other people were so much attracted with the term, without even doing the ethnographic work, all were claiming themselves, claiming all their works as ethnography of this, ethnography of this, ethnography of this. but no proper ethnography is carried out. They say anything related to culture, they call it as, instead of simply telling that it is an information related to culture, they say ethnography, which means that term has only thing. The reason I tell you, sometimes some terms gets attraction. Somehow or other, the term folklore never get attraction since its inception, because later also who were leading these discipline, who were contributing in the discipline also matters. Many a times, because see in folklore, where many a times the folklore was related to a marginal group, but the American definition for folklore is any group. Remember, I was talking about here definitions. If you follow the definition, American definition for folklore, American definition for folk, any group can be called as folk on the basis of a single common cultural denominator. But if you depend upon the European definitions, Russian definitions, or Nordic definitions, or German definitions, then the problem lies. The politics comes. You identify, you relate folk with the marginal group. Then once if it is marginal group, even if it is true, naturally it is it is a neglected field. So you are that is the reason why sometimes folklore is not getting its appropriate respect. That is one thing. So then the word is a problem. Then because of the too much of ideological stand for giving voice to the voiceless, to the marginal group, that is the reason, another reason to lose respect. I'm not justifying the low respect for discipline. Remember, why is that it is getting lower discipline? Why is that it is having no respect? I am only talking about that. Remember, don't think that I myself subscribe or approve this kind of low respectability for the discipline. No, not at all. Why? How they are disrespected? How they are demeaned by the others? Only I am explaining, because again, yeah, what I am telling, no, I have told one sentence. Folklore is including all and is was not respected. That's all. Then he has jumped to other point what he wanted to say. But I am catching that statement and I am interpreting. I am adding, substantiating the points for the statement what Professor Payne made. And another thing, many a times, folklore was related with the nationalism. Folklore was related to conservatism. Folklore was related with the antiquarianism. So all these things, these ideological marginality, nationalism, conservation, antiquarianism, all these things are not the cup of tea for the people who have power, naturally. It is quite natural, see here, it is folklore something even now, recent works also, keeping with this thing only recent works, like James Scott's work and all you may be knowing. The weapons of the weak. Whose weapon? What is that weapon? Weapon is nothing but folklore. It is in the hands of whom? With the voiceless people, with the powerless people. So the powerful people, how would they give respect to this powerless phenomenon, powerless discipline? That is the issue. And they see this problem not only folkloristics is facing, even anthropology based. Even now, some people used to say, "Oh, anthropology, it is the product of colonialism, or it is the child of colonialism." But many times, people don't understand. Okay, anthropology would have emerged as a discipline during the colonial period for a particular purpose, but it has come a long way. It has come a long way. It was not now there no more colonialism, even if it is there, and now it is anthropology is such a discipline. It gives respect to the fellow human beings. It is against any kind of egocentrism. All these things are there. They, without realizing the recent developments, recent happenings in the discipline, sometimes they hold on to the old things, and so that is the, because those things, it is the problem of the people. It is not the problem of the discipline. That is that. And then I will other things we discussed this so many times, so I should not take much time. I will be completing within 5-10 minutes because I am very eagerly looking forward to hear Professor Sudhakar Reddy also. I was also telling you, the relationship of folklore with the other disciplines, and very often it is highly related to the either with the subject of literature or with the subject of the anthropology. And I do not want to discuss much on the relationship of folklore with the literature, but let me come to the relationship of folkloristics with anthropology. See, even now, many cultural anthropologists, they think that folklore is a part of the cultural anthropology, or rather, folklore can be viewed as a most specialized, one of the specialized branches of cultural anthropology. If that is the case, if that is if this is your standpoint, then how would it become? How would it develop as an independent discipline of its own? There is a problem, and this problem started not now. Problem is not the contemporary problem. Problem started in the 19th century itself. Why 19th century? We very often we give due importance for William John Thoms' definition for folklore. Not only definition for folklore, he was the one to introduce the term first in the writings, and he said he not only introduced the term for the first time in the fields, in the intellectual field. He defined the folklore this way as what? Folklore, according to William John Thoms, the manners, customs, observances, superstitions, ballads, proverbs, etc. of the olden time. Remember, of the olden time. And many a times people who talk about folklore, those who talk about the genesis of folklore as a discipline, starts from what to say, this 1845 William John Thoms thing. But more or less during the same time, or some people say some 8-9 years prior to John Thoms, there was one scholar in the same England. His name was Clum. He was the first one to introduce a term called kultur. Kultur. It is not culture. Kultur. Kultur. So only later only the term kultur later introduced as a concept of culture, developed nicely by Edward Tyler. But when Clum introduced the term, even before William John Thoms, or more or less during the time of William John Thoms, he defined kultur, Kultur or kultur, this way. What did he say? Kultur to include customs and skills, domestic and public life, in peace and war, religion, science and art. So, the definition given by Clum as kultur, the definition given by William John Thoms folklore, more or less resembles. Not only more or less resembles, one is indebted to the other, somehow or other. See, here I once again want to emphasize the two words used respectively by these two scholars. William John Thoms, after listing the things, he says olden time. He emphasizes olden time. Clum emphasizes the war, peace and war time. Peace, war, science, war and science. So war, when you say war and science, they are contemporary phenomena, because it was during the if it is war, even prior to the First World War, or science. These are all war and science are the emerging phenomena. Or forget about war, science is emerging phenomena. So Clum gives importance for culture, scientific outlook, whereas Toms gives emphasis for the antiquarian or the olden time perspective. Though the public antiquity, old antiquity, all these things are rejected. Unfortunately, they rejected the terms, but they continue to have the same spirit. That's the problem. Somehow or other, only after E.B. Taylor came to the field, things have been settled. He then introduced the term culture. Again, I made one small mistake. Clum was not the Englishman, he was a German, but that German word kultur was popularly discussed in the English speaking intellectuals, that only later absorbed, taken by E.B. Taylor as the principal concept for modern anthropology, in his book Primitive Culture. So, then I also want to, the last point I will touch upon, though there are so many points, but I have to stick on to the timing. Professor Painad was also telling, instead of folklore, many times nowadays folk life, that term also popularly used. When you say folk life, it is more or less taking you directly to the process of culture. When it is folklore, it is taking you to the genres, art forms. If it is life, then it is culture. So this way, when as much as you take the definition from folklore to folk life, you are taking the field more and more towards cultural anthropology. That is happening there. Another thing also, the anthropologists, there is a clear-cut distinction among the anthropologists later, after Taylor. One literary anthropological folkloristics, or literary folkloristics and anthropological folkloristics. Those who many times, folklore was viewed by many people as simply as verbal art. But some of the stalwarts of the, or even pioneers of the anthropology only gave utmost importance for the folklore. They were treating folklore as part and parcel of the culture. It is not only it is a part of the culture, it would also reflect the culture. So the later scholars like Boas, Malinowski, or Ruth Benedict, Margaret Mead, anybody, even up to even till the contemporary scholars like Victor Turner or Clifford Woods, take anybody, no anthropologist would undermine the value of the folklore. Rather, they would claim as if it is the part of the anthropology. That is their problem. But no one would undermine the highness or greatness of the folklore. So I stop here. Not that I have summarized everything what Professor Painad said, but what I could remember now only I am able to say. But if there is a time after Professor Sudhar presentation, you can raise some questions, some of the points. If you feel that very important point that Professor Painad said, but I didn't touch upon, if you feel like that, you can bring to bring to the discussion. We will discuss. And again, I tell you, you are going to have main show from tomorrow only. What you have heard, the preview. Preview itself is so strong, and I am looking forward from Professor Painad what is that he is going to say from tomorrow onwards. And once again, I thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity of sharing some of my views, and also thank all the participants for your patient hearing. Thank you so much. Bye. Sir, I finished. Madam Shyamala, I finished.
Yeah, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I profusely thank Professor Chella Perumal, sir, for his scholarly reflections on the subject matter of the workshop that has been presented by Professor Raghavan Painad, sir, in the previous sessions. Thank you very much, sir, for discussing the relationship between folklore and other disciplines, particularly anthropology, and on ideological premises. Thank you very much, sir. Now I request the today's speaker.
No.
Yes.
Please allow him the discussion.
Okay, sir.
If any participants would like to react.
Sir, if you
Yes.
take discussion unnecessarily, it will divert. I will wait. Let Professor Sudhakar Reddy also finishes his lecture, because if he
Okay then. Okay.
unnecessarily, it will deviate. Lot of time it will go. Then you won't have control over it. So let all the people can have reserve their comments, questions with them. After the presentation of Professor Sudhakar Reddy, we can take up together the discussion. That I feel. Because now we have to give, we will have the presentation by Professor Sudhakar Reddy, then we will have discussion together, no problem. Sir, what, sir, Professor Sudhakar Reddy, am I right?
Yes, sir. As you wish.
Now you invite Professor Sudhakar Reddy.
Sir, I welcome Professor Y.A. Sudhakar Reddy, sir, from Center for Folk Culture Studies, University of Hyderabad, to give his presentation.
Thank you.
To Sudhakar Reddy, sir. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Shyamala Garu, and thank Professor Bhagavath Reddy. He is the director of the Indian Institute of Folklore, and for giving me an opportunity to share some of my views as well as evaluate Professor Raghavan Painad's workshop series lectures. And I am really thankful to Professor Raghavan Painad, sir. He is a great scholar in this field, and he started much early in the field of folklore. Then we were not at all aware of folklore. In fact, me was not at all aware of anything related to folklore. And I happened to meet Professor Bhattavatsal Reddy, Professor Chella Perumal, and Professor Raghavan Painad, and several others in the workshop series. Then I was exposed for the first time to folklore, and I started learning certain things. Now, can I request Sivakumar sir to...
Sir, sharing, sir.
Thank you. Then I will proceed. Today's my lecture would be, it's not basically a lecture like, yeah, thank you. We have put the last slide first, that is good. So I can finish it. Anyway, yeah. So today's this thing, next slide, please. I'll start with the next slide. Yeah. The objectives of this lecture is basically two. One is to evaluation of workshop teachings by Professor Raghavan Painad sir, and secondly, the epistemological alternative. We call it is in the modern terminology alternate kind of epistemology. Is there anything like that, or should we carry out or go by with only one perspective that is being delivered? So this is another dimension that I would like to bring in. First of all, as part of the next slide, please. As part of the evaluation, I must say, next slide, please. Sir, next slide. Next slide, please. Yes. So, as part of the evaluation of workshop teachings, what I found from Professor Raghavan Painadu is that I am just summing up. I am not going like what just now Professor Chella Perumal has given very excellent synthesis of whatever Raghavan Painadu sir said, as well as his own contributions to some of these ideas which he has given are excellent. Really, I appreciate that, the way he has presented and the way he has summed up the whole workshop series, and the objective behind this workshop series also he has beautifully summed up, which I can never do it. And hats off to Professor Chella Perumal. Now, as part of my observations, this is just an observation I am making. What Professor Raghavan Painadu sir is doing is basically a modernist schema of the knowledge production as a story. how knowledge production was done or through the ages and how it is going to end up or it's going to evolve further. That is the kind of story that he is narrating. Now, story has three parts. One is the basic storyline. The other one, what is known as the causal relationship within the story for progression, which is known as plot. And the third one is the discourse, where we can intervene. I mean, the narrator can intervene and then make his own comments about the field, etc., etc. So that is called discourse. Now, in these three forms, if you look at this is a story, basically a narrative of Professor Raghavan Painad sir based on the modern schema. Schemata means scheme. So, what is that modernist scheme? Modernist scheme or modernity started with what is known as positivism and empiricism. I need not go much in detail, and all that is something to do with observable phenomena. Now, for him, the knowledge production started with evolution theory, because the 19th century was flooded with all, even earlier also, flooded with the so-called evolution theory. And that evolution theory told the story of humans, how they have evolved from simple to complex. That is the crux, that is the underlying structure of evolution. All evolution theories, including neo-evolution theory, is how the forms, the cultural traits or culture in general evolved from simple to complex. How folklore evolved from simple to complex. That is the evolutionary theory kind of a story that we hear about the mankind. Now, in order to do this, or in the process of doing this, empiricism becomes an important tool. What constitutes empiricism? What is the underlying structure of empiricism? Empiricism is not just the numbers. Normally, people think that it is just the numbers. No, it is basically units. Modernity has started observing any phenomena by making them into observable units. Linguistics, for instance, started with a minimal unit called phoneme. Phoneme is the unit with which you can observe what the language structure is about. Likewise, for any discipline, a unit is a must. Even for a scientist, if he is observing something, he makes all his chemicals into units and then combine those chemicals, then make observation, come out with the conclusion or come out with the finding. Similarly, social scientists, even humanities, does the same principle of observing any phenomena into units. That is the reason why you get a short story is different from novel is different from fictional story or scientific fiction, science fiction, and so on and so forth. So all kinds of literary genres or the so-called literature also having units within these structures, within these things. Drama, for instance, of Shakespearean drama is a unit of literature, a piece of literature. So they are comparable with other units of dramas by the other, so on and so forth. So this is the crux of empiricism. And all disciplinary knowledge is seen by uniting either by science or by social sciences or even by humanity. So in that plane, all are equal. This is fundamental understanding of 19th century, this thing. Once they have done these units, the units have become themselves in a larger kind of segments. So segmentation of knowledge became the prime idea of all university system or academia or academics or even industry for that matter. So what is segmentation? Segmentation is a larger unit of a particular kind of discipline or a particular kind of academia with a particular kind of methodology, not only methodology, but also the nomenclature or taxonomy, you call it. Without any taxonomy, you can't have a discipline. So disciplinary taxonomy gives you command over the discipline. Therefore, it is all part of the segmentation, process of segmentation. But what happened with, in reality, what happened is that knowledge never started in segmentation. I will come to that part in the co-evolution model, but just as a kind of observation I am telling, knowledge never started as a segmentation. It is a continuum, knowledge continuum into different kinds of segments. Later on, we divided them into segments, different kinds of spheres of life, and combinedly, they started observing the phenomena. for Greek philosophers, for that matter, there are three mother disciplines, out of which all other disciplines emerged. Three disciplines: philosophy, history, literature. These are the three mother disciplines, out of which all other disciplines emerged. I don't have time to explain how they have, actually made this kind of observation. I'm not getting into that. Later on, modern period, we get into this so-called university or academic period. In the academic period, number of disciplines started emerging, making disciplines and sub-disciplines growing into disciplines and so on and so forth happened. That is what now also we are looking at. So from the holistic knowledge system to disciplinary knowledge system, from disciplinary knowledge system, again we have come back to what is known as supra or super knowledge system. Super knowledge system is like, super specialities. For instance, you find if somebody asks, I am a mythologist, he doesn't say that I am a folklorist. If he is totally working on this one, then he says that he is a mythologist. If somebody is working on oral formulaic theory and intensely, he will say that he is a formalist, oral formalist, so on and so forth. So it has become supradisciplinary kind of nature, like we see in what is known as hospitals, supradiscipline. Cancer is separate, and then your lung diseases are dealt with separate, so on and so supra. So it is all super discipline. From super disciplines, we are getting into supradiscipline. Supradiscipline is again holistic knowledge. We are making other disciplines come together to make one's own discipline, and this is a cross-disciplinary kind of entrepreneur, and that is again holistic knowledge. So this is the cycle that epistemology followed, and in the process, modernist schema is only for discipline. And Raghavan Painadu sir is actually explaining this part of this modernist enterprise, where science, social science, humanities, and parallelly industry having similar kind of methodology that the disciplines follow, the same kind of methodology, where you have the raw material, process, then product. Again, the same kind of segmentation of the products. This is what the whole issue lies in. And therefore, these segments now at a later date, in all disciplines, I must say, has gone into a dialectical arrangement, or you may say the dialectics, they call dialectics or binaries. So, for example, in anthropology and folklore, we talk about this nature-culture dichotomy, several other dichotomies for that matter, verbal, non-verbal, so on and so forth. So everywhere we divide this knowledge system into dichotomic relationships, then see them in a syntagmatic manner, dialectics, equal and opposite forces, and when they come together, how do they react into making into a synthesis, a typical Marxian kind of epistemology. So this is again the modernist thing. So if you take the clue from Raghavan Painadu sir, he is trying to do this kind of synthesis, ultimately where the discipline is going to go, where it is going to synthesize. That is the question that he is raising. Under globalization, commodification. Your folklore is going to get into commodified kind of phenomena that is going to emerge. Then folklore is going to die, or it may survive in a kind of situation where it doesn't have the so-called quote and unquote life. It has a different kind of life, which perhaps Hanko calls it a secondary existence or second life of folklore, whatever it is. Now, so this is the schema that he is trying to explain. Then the syntagmatic arrangement that is just now I said, science, social sciences, humanities, and industries. This is a syntagmatic arrangement. One, somewhere idea develops, enters into the other realm takes it and try to either reinforce that system or deviates and then makes into another kind of knowledge system, so on and so forth. So all our knowledge system is into this kind of formation. So now the question remains, the final one, what Professor Raghavan Painadu was telling is that modernist understanding of globalization. Typically, it's a modernist, and it is not a postmodernist understanding of globalization. Modernist understanding of globalization, because for him, commodity or commodification or consumerism is basically the scheme that actually Marx explained, not the neo-Marxists, not Althusser, not the others who have explained, but Marx, how he has explained. See, product, what is product? A very good thesis by Marx is the AMP model, Asiatic Mode of Production model, which he has dealt in 1853 and published in New York Tribune, a very famous kind of essay. It has shook the world, and India has only AMP model, Asiatic Mode of Production model, based on one conclusion or one finding that India never produced under AMP, Asiatic Mode of Production, no commodities, no goods, only products. What does it mean? It means that India produced only the products which has a use value. Use value. So I'm using something, suppose I need something like, garlic, which I don't produce. Some others have produced that garlic. I'll go to him, give my product called rice or paddy, and then get that garlic or tamarind or whatever it is. So this is the exchange pattern based on the use value. So therefore, Indians never produced commodities; they produced only the products, use value. But what makes commodity as commodity is that it has exchange value. Use value plus exchange value is equal to commodity as per the Marxian scheme. So what is that commodity now? What is that exchange value? Exchange value is that basically your CMC, that is commodity, money, commodity. As a peasant, when I want to grow something, I will grow my paddy. By putting paddy, I will grow rice, and then I will make this rice into a marketable product. Therefore, I will convert the rice into money, and then that money I am using it for what is known as commodity. Product. So this is exactly what this thing was. CMC. It has changed to MCM. Money, then you have the commodity, then you have the money. So now the globalized world is functioning on this paradigm called exchange value paradigm. That is the modernist understanding of globalization. That is modernist understanding of commodity, what you call commodification, right? But Marx never called it as commodification. Marx used the term called commodity fetishism, a worshipable object. Commodity itself becomes a worshipable object. That's a different kind of this thing. I'm not getting into it. Now, what is the postmodern understanding of consumerism or commodification? It is not simply, please listen to me carefully, this is not simply ending with exchange value. Use value plus exchange value is commodity, but commodification doesn't end with commodity. It adds under value what Baudrillard and even Jemison, and I'm not quoting, several fellows are there in postmodern field. They said that the sign value is added, sign value, symbolic value is added to make a commodity into a consumable product, a commodification, or consumer, what do you call consumer? What is that? I forgot what is that? Consumerism. Yeah, consumerism. Sorry. So this consumerism is basically adding sign value. Now, all folklore will not become commodified, will not become consumerism. Only that portion of folklore which has the capacity to add sign value becomes commodification or consumerism, comes under consumerism. So that is very, very, very crucial to understand. Now, once you have this understanding of I'm not getting into what is sign value and other hyper reality and all, several other concepts are there. I'm not getting into that. But my understanding of what Professor Raghavan Painadu is telling, that he stopped at modernist enterprise of commodification, consumerism. But postmodernism goes beyond this concept of consumerism, and it enters into another kind of realm, which is something called figural consumption, which is consumerism, which is otherwise status oriented, status symbol attached to that consumption, so on and so forth. Anyway, art and culture is going to make that. So the cultural industry is going to enter into this field and make the consumerism possible through commodification of cultural arts. Anyway, that is the thing. Now, let me come to the second part, what I have just said, epistemological alternative. Is there any other way of looking at? So far what Professor Raghavan Painadu sir said, I summed it up in a brief manner. And this is an excellent presentation because it's very good, thought-provoking, and every student, including me, has to learn several things from these and to think, not simply blindly follow whatever somebody is telling, but to think. It generates a lot of thinking, a lot of critical appreciation of these things. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So in the next slide, what you find, this is just a slide I kept it. Basic characteristic, Shivakumar sir. Yes, basic characteristics of folklore. Yeah, thank you. Folklore,
just 1 second, sir.
Okay.
3 seconds it will take.
Okay. Then I will inform a little early. No, fine. Thank you. Sorry. So we all know that this is the basic characteristics of folklore. And if you look at what is the basic difference with culture and folklore, or anthropology and folklore, is that folklore is rely on that particular part of culture which is transmitted through voracy or volarity, through face-to-face communication system. So that they call it as folklore. The remaining ones are not. But what is voracy? Voracy also means non-verbal genre, which means material culture. It is also getting transmitted. So voracy is not just confined to verbal. It is not just confined to word of mouth, but it is also all your inheritance systems. As part of your cultural inheritance, you transmit to the next generation. That generation will do whatever it wants to do with that. That becomes folklore product. That becomes folklore. So this is the basic characteristics of folklore. Next slide, please. Next slide. So what I am trying to say here is that basically folklore is a inheritance system. Please catch that point, inheritance system. Even Professor Raghavan Painadu sir is also telling about evolution theory based on the same kind of notion of inheritance system. Folklore is also inheritance system. Folk is a inheriting group, identifiable inherited group, and what the product that the folk is producing is the inheritance system that you find as folklore. So these are all connected with inheritance. Now, if you look at this concept of alternity, simultaneously, we have not only the evolution going on one side, the co-evolution arguments are also going on the other side, but that is of a later time, not necessarily in the 19th century. Basically, in the 20th century, we find people getting involved in trying to understand evolution. So basically, it is an evolution kind of thing, how life evolved in this planet Earth. That was the concern. And the best way to observe for scientists is animals, plants, so on and so forth, because human beings are more complex, evolved into a complex system by 20th century. So it is difficult for them to understand the human behavior of 20th century unless otherwise you go back to the primitive times. How did they go to the primitive times or primitive stage? By observing the animal behavior and the plant behavior. This is where the co-evolution starts. Now, the evolution theory says, here I must say that there is something called ethology, a discipline called ethology. Basically, ethology is a discipline which started in the 20th century, which has two things. Observe the animal behavior and try to see those kinds of behaviors in the social organization or in the human behavior. So it is the study of animal behavior as well as human behavior in order to understand, cognate how humans work. This is ethology, the concept of ethology. So ethology as a science developed, and Jensen is there, several others, I'm not quoting all those people, but basically this is how it started. Once they started looking at, on the other hand, you have the archaeologists, historians, prehistorians rather, and also anthropologists working on the human evolution. Human evolution, the stages of human evolution, you find all these people here here what you find, different kinds of species that emerge. The earliest species is these two, then connected after this one, then this one, then this one, then finally comes this, and then to this. So what is the difference here? He is the Homo erectus. Homo erectus, and he is the Homo sapiens sapiens, human-like being, but not human, total human being. So this is the evolutionary kind of process. What makes this evolution possible is the interesting phenomena here. Now, according to coevolution, evolution theory said, simple to complex, but coevolution never started with that premise. They started with the premise that complex systems evolve, they are already complex and they are innately complex, but looks simple in the beginning, but once they start growing or developing, that complexity is manifested or coming out. This is the premise of coevolution. Now, what happens here is that if you look at these figures, these figures, you find the head part, you find there is something called, the conical shape appearing in the cortex. This is called brain cortex, forehead. Cortex is smaller, and therefore your intellect, that portion of the intellect that develops within the brain, which is consciousness, which can understand, aware things around you, your environment, etc., not only awareness, but also act upon, change them, that develops only when the cortex starts becoming broader. How this happened? Engels gives a very interesting story to this. Engels says that it is because of the labor that this particular thing. What is labor? Labor is the one which makes the difference between animal world and the plant world to that of the human world. That is the basic argument of Engels, Friedrich Engels. Now, according to him, what is labor? Labor is something that develops because of these arms. You have this palm. Within the palm, this finger, thumb. The thumb gets separate with the remaining four fingers in the function. Thumb has more flexibility. So when you eat your food, Indians eat food right hand, whatever it is there, which is left hand or right hand. What is the technique they use? Indian shuffle. This thumb puts your Buddha ball, rice ball which you make, into your mouth, shuffles. This is the Indian technique of eating, right? Spoons, external, they will put like this. And if you go to an Englishman or a European, he will only do like this because he doesn't know the Indian shuffle. The Indians are very good in this shuffling. So the Romopithecus, the Indian model of the ape man, basically developed this technique of labor where the thumb started getting away from it, and therefore this one started affecting the brain. And therefore your forehead started increasing, cortex started increasing. And the next slide, please. If you look at the next slide, you will understand basically the frontal lobe, which is there. Yeah, this is the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe, consciousness of environment, reacting to our environment, executive functioning and judgments, controlling emotions, controlling language usage, word associations, memory and motor, everything is done by this frontal lobe. This is interesting part of evolution. So this is basically the co-evolutionists believe that it is not done because of simple to complex. It has started that innately that particular species has this innate capacity to potential to develop. Therefore, it could develop. Once it developed and started making its own products, its own labor into products, its own resources, then that becomes cultural product, and that culture becomes a buffer zone for further development, and it will not go back to the species. Now the species will wither away. There is no need, and we will never find any ape now becoming a human. That's because the cultural evolutionists believe that culture has acted as a buffer, and it created a different species called humans, and therefore the ape man passed away. They never remain the same. Next slide, please. So this is the coevolution model. Now, next slide. When you go to next slide, you will understand. I just want to bring this very, very crucial statement by Ong, Walter J. Ong, Oracy and Literacy. Very interesting book. Everybody, I expect and I recommend everybody to read this book. There are two books, in fact. Anyway, you read at least this book, Literacy to Orality to Literacy, Technologizing the World. If you look at this, he developed a particular theory called Ongism. Later on, people called it as Ongism. What is that Ongism? Ongism, where knowledge is a product of language and the medium in which language is communicated determines the mind. So it is the mind. See, normally people think that the language controls the mind and therefore determines the mind. No, it is the medium rather than the language itself. Language, of course, produces knowledge. But this knowledge, how it gets, works on your mind is because of the medium. Very interesting observation. I will come and elaborate in my lectures, I mean in the last portion of this lecture, this thing. But remember, so the medium is important. What is the medium? Medium is simply like, orality is a medium. Speech is a medium. You're uttering the words into a language form is a medium, or you're writing them, converting that into a linguistic sign, a legible sign or a writable sign is a medium. Writing is a medium, and drawing a picture is a medium. Visual capture of things is a medium, and so on and so forth. So mediums are different. Now you have language system, how it works. When I'm speaking, you are able to understand. Once I stop, nothing. You can't understand anything, nor you can hear anything. So language works only with the sound. And whenever I utter the sound exists only when it is out of its context. Only when it is coming out of my glottals and other things, it exists. Then it dies, immediately dies. The moment I finish my sentence, the earlier sentence or the earlier words die. So this is the problem with the language of the communication in orality. And therefore, folk have devised a very good technique in order to make alive folklore repetition. The concept of repetition comes, and how this is repetition, we find oral formulaic theory a wonderful, how narrators memorize, the folk singers memorize. It is based on the formula, which is nothing but the metrical sense of the sounds. The sound in a metrical sense is uttered, and therefore he remembers his story through this formula. Anyway, now I'm not getting into that. So basically, this is a problem with the speech act. Now, if you transfer that to a writing system is called ESS. Speech is called ISS, internal symbolic system. ESS is external symbolic system. It is out there. I can come back to my reading. I can come back to my whatever I have written and then read it back. So when I am reading, I'm basically, what I'm doing, I'm reading aloud. Therefore, I am speaking it out. Reading is another function of speech. Otherwise, writing innately is reading. Either way, anyway, I'm not going to confuse you, but that is another medium. So what happens when I found out, say science also, what is happening in science? Science does laboratory kind of experiment and try to find out the findings, right? Whatever it might be the findings. Now, it is not enough if he simply does a laboratory kind of thing and makes the notations or whatever the observations he made into chemicals and how much, what is the time frequency that has taken to a particular chemical to react with this particular and the result, so on and so forth. All that he writes. So what happens? The writing which he is doing is meta science, science about science. So when he makes the thesis, it is basically a writing system. Basically, a literary piece is producing. So literature is not different from science. Science is also a piece of literature where he starts writing, right? Some of his writing is fictional. Some of his writing is true. Whatever he has observed, he writes. But what he observed between these, when he interprets it, when he puts his own thing and then try to write it, which he has not observed, then it becomes fictional. So part of our scientists' data, if you look at, partly it is also fictional, like your novel, like your etc. stories. So literature and science are not different. So too the social sciences. What I see in the field, try to collect as data, I am converting that data into a literary sign or a numerical sign, put them into flowcharts, etc. Again, a writing process. Then I am writing the entire thesis into a kind of a storytelling narrative that becomes my thesis. Therefore, without language, without writing, nothing exists in the scientific world. So science, humanities, and social sciences are in the same paradigm. They are in the same level of production. Anyway, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So when you look at what is coevolution that I'm talking about is, I read a lot of books on this coevolution. I'm not making just for the sake, but so much I read and I'm getting confused also. I'm also getting confused by Professor Raghavan Painad's lectures because it is so intense, so thought-provoking. So your mind is, going into several kinds of things. Difficult to sometimes to hold it, right? When a mind gets challenged, how the mind response is very crucial, right? If the response is not to the tune of the challenge, then you get into confusion, right? This is what is known as, or Arnold Toynbee's notion of writing history. Basically, Arnold Toynbee comes up with a role rally model, which is otherwise called as challenge and response model, which is scientists have called it as tectonic model, how the glaciers started moving, how the earth started forming. Previously, it used to be called as continental drift theory, but now it is known as tectonic model, tectonic theory. Basically, this theory and Arnold Toynbee theory talks about 3.5 beats. Every culture has a 3.5 beats. Every civilization, rather, he calls them civilization. Civilization has 3.5 beats, which means what? Three challenges are responded effectively. In the next challenge, no response, therefore it remains as a challenge, dies. So he has applied it to Indus Valley cultures, he has applied to Aryan civilization, the English culture, so on and so forth. 142 cultures he has studied and came up with this idea called challenge and response model, or otherwise known role rally model. Anyway, I am saying when Raghavan Painadu sir is challenging with ideas, I am not able to respond, therefore I am into confusion. I don't want to die. Basically, I want to keep up with that. I may take time to understand and then come back with my response. But this is what everybody as a participant should do. Because these responses, if you don't take it as a participant or don't take it as a student, we die as students. We are only vomiting. We are only mimicking. We are just vomiting whatever is given in our classroom and get our marks and get out. What is the use of that knowledge? What is the use of those degrees? Now the problem with the NEP is also that. Anyway, I'm deviating. Now come back to this evolution model. What is evolution? Evolution talks about Homo sapiens, human-like beings. Homo sapiens is the Latin word, anyway, then a Spanish word rather, and then came into the Latin, and then became to the English word. Now then, the savagery, barbarism, civilization, 4 stages. Here, coevolution also talks about 4 stages. What is the commonality? The commonality is that in these 4 stages, inheritance system is the common feature. Inheritance system. Homo sapiens have gone to the savagery. In between, they have a kind of inheritance system, which they call it as myth-making system. Some of these scientists have identified, one philosopher, German philosopher, identified this as a mythic phase, mythic stage of human evolution. So where humans started, talking about myths, or rather narrating myths in such a way that not in the verbal forms, but in the forms of art, cave art, in the forms of ritual, so on, myth ritual theory, typical to myth ritual theory. And therefore, mythology, even for Levi-Strauss has taken basically Vico Giambasta of Italian philosopher. He has followed very closely Giambasta's writings and came up with that. Giambasta calls that primitive science. So he also talks about mythology. Levi-Strauss also talks about mythology as a primitive science. So it is a primitive explanation, primitive man's explanation towards the understanding of things which he is otherwise not able to understand. It is an explanation. So myth is divided into several types, like charted myths. You have customs myth, where the charted myths develop some kind of expository myths, where the explanation is given, so on and so forth. Or origin myths, talking about the etiological myths. Origin myths are how the origins of the world came. So different types of myths are there. One of the major function of the myth is to explain the unexplainable through ritual and through narrative. That is the mythology's function. So what Homo sapiens did in the later phase before becoming savagery, they have this mythic phase, then they have entered, part of that savagery is because of that mythic phase. The fears of not able to understand nature convert some of these fears into worshipable objects, convert them into some kind of animistic kind of belief system, then to totemistic belief system, so on and so forth. So this is the area that culture started emerging. And that is very primitive. Like Raghavan sir said, it is a primitive culture. Then comes the food producing culture, barbarism. So some of these the savagery things are inherited into barbaric phase. Say for example, you are sneezing. Sneezing, if you sneeze, most of the Indian cultures across the subcontinent of India has this opinion that once if somebody is going out, if somebody sneezes, the fellow will not go out, he comes back and then sits for a while or drinks something, water, and then goes and things like that. There is a pass. Why this behavior? This is a savage behavior, where a human, this is an explanation given by, what's his name, the savage, I forgot his name, anthropologist of 19th century, with E.B. Taylor. He has written several things. I forgot his name. I'm not getting his name now. Anyway, so this is an explanation given by him where the savage behavior, the people go for hunting. If somebody is catching cold and he sneezes, the animal runs away. Therefore, the catch will not come. Therefore, this sneezing itself becomes a prohibitive taboo. That gets into the barbaric stage. Now we do it differently. Suppose I'm going to do a good work, I will come back and sit because I feel that this is a bad omen. So it's a savage thing entering into barbaric stage, and that is also entering into civilized stage in several ways. Sneezing becomes a kind of belief, a kind of behavior in this thing. Now come to the COVID. So, what made the COVID? You are cold or you are sneezing. Totally gave a totally different kind of interpretation to the civilized world. If somebody sneezes in front of you, distance, you can't touch, you can't do. So the pollution norms started changing. Untouchability started becoming more overtly expressed in terms of human touch, so on and so forth. So this is inheritance system. Now you go to this co-evolution. Similar kinds of inheritance system is also found in 4 stages. Next slide, please. So what you find here is that the evolutionary model is basically what you find in a unilinear progression. The time frames are unilinear, arrangement is unilinear, so on and so forth. And I don't have much time to explain. So it is a unilinear progression model. Your time frames are ancient, medieval, modern histories are all unilinear. Prehistory, within prehistory, lower Paleolithic, upper Paleolithic, Paleolithic and upper Paleolithic, Mesolithic, then Neolithic, all this is timelines based on unilinear progression models. But whereas, if you look at the co-evolution, it is a multilinear progression. I'm not talking about the multilinear progression of the neo-evolutionists. Neo-evolutionists also talk about multilinear, but multilinear again in the same unilinear progression model. Again in the same form of unilinear, except that stages will not be passed, necessarily passed by all cultures in the same manner. One can skip one stage and go into the other stage. This is basically the Maoist contradictions. The paper, once you found Maoist dialectics started coming into, academic circles, that was taken by the neoclassicists and also started explaining from this contradictions paper. Anyway, that's a different thing. So what I'm trying to say here is that multilinear progression is simultaneously existing, and it is like a cobweb. It is like a spider netting the cobweb. It has both linear and horizontal and different kinds of even cyclical. So all these things are, you have life, death, life. Life after death is also explained in terms of the life. And what is the Indian belief system? Life, death, again rebirth. Karma, punarjanma, again karma. So you have, till you finish this karma cycle, your soul comes back to life and then takes different forms, so on and so forth. Both the Buddhists, the Jainis, and the Hindu philosophies, everyone explained in this fashion, that is known as cyclical or spiral or cyclical kind of fashion. So, but whereas the multilinear of unilinear coevolution model is typically multilinear, therefore it is both unilinear as well as cyclical. It has both components together. Therefore, this model is now tested or even experimented by scientists, social scientists, as well as humanities fellows. Right? All scholars did this, but we are not taking the names, or their works are not very popular amongst folklore. Next slide, please. I want to finish it fast. Next slide, please. Now, this is the first type of coevolution. If you go back, that is genetic. GIS. Genetic Inheritance System. GIS. Genetics. So, how the human life has come into existence? We have this human life being formed, what is known as through DNA, right? Ribonical acid, DNA. This DNA is the nucleus, which has four, what you call chemicals. Out of these four chemicals, somewhere around, lot of 3 billion bases are formed, and 99% of population has one of these 3 billion bases, right? So what actually happens in this DNA model is that 4 chemicals, the way they interact with each other, the way they sequence or order with each other, makes the whole DNA structure different, makes your personality different, your physical features different, your female or male different, so on and so forth. So the DNA is nothing but the information, a protein. It's a protein having 4 chemicals, and these chemicals pass this information system through the cell. And this information system is built up into a kind of human, and this within the human, this system is already there in the cell form. Simpler form, it is there. But inside that simple form, we have the complex system. It is analogous to language. This is typically analogous to language. What is that language? If you take English, 26 alphabets, there is a theory called theory of limited possibilities. Theory of limited possibilities in linguistics. Now, what is this theory says? Out of these 26 alphabets, one can make n number of words. Just 26 alphabets, but n number of words are created out of these, and the formation is limited. Where the O occurs in a particular given word, you take the entire O, put them into the computer system. Wherever the O word is coming, in between, a word, W-O-R-L-D, word, W-O-R-D. Like that, you put all that. Where the O occurs, whether it occurs in the first, the second, the third, fourth, where it occurs in that sequence, makes the whole word different, like you are in DNA. So the language system is typical to that of the DNA system. And therefore, the DNA people, the scientists, have said that this is a very clear case of language formation, right? Language, in a language, word act as symbols, like in cell, the information act as symbols because they are part of the governed system of signs that are self-referential. One word, what is sentence? Sentence is made of number of words, right? So number of words are made of number of letters. So number of letters makes a word, and number of words make a sentence, or phrases, then number of phrases makes a sentence, whatever it is, whatever the way you want to put it. Now, each word is having a self-referential system to the other word. Therefore, it is always in the self-referential system that the language sustains. This is what Ong is trying to say. Your knowledge system is a referential system. So when you say science, when you say social science, when you say humanities, we are referring to a particular system of thinking. So it's a referential system that we are talking into. Now in the DNA, you have all this Darwinism, neo-Darwinism, etc., etc. Whatever it is, the DNA is basically equivalent to analogous to language system, and therefore the order appears, and number of species as human beings are in this planet Earth because they are different because your lang is different, but your parole is different as well as your lang is different. One can make number of sentences manifested, which is a parole. Parole is understood only by manifestation of language. Otherwise, nobody knows what is language. And this parole, according to the Saussure, basically leads to something called an abstract notion of language, which he calls as language, that comes from that lang. So that is an abstract notion. From that I take and then manifest that, depending on my vocabulary, depending on my training, depending on my community, etc., etc. This operates on these limitations. Therefore, there is a theory of limited possibilities of language. Anyway, next slide, please. Next slide, please. So what
Sir? Sir, I think some network problem. ഇവിടെ എന്തോ പ്രോബ്ലം അല്ല
Sir, mic muted. Sir, muted.
Yeah, there is a problem with technology. Epigenetic. This is a typical epigenetic feature. Anyway, so what happens with this epigenetic formation is that basically it affects the RNA. What you see in the down, a figure like RNA. This is RNA. Now this RNA is basically as I said, ribonucleic acid. This is something to do with phenome type. This develops phenome types. There is a genome type. Basically, because of the genes, a genome type emerges. Like a person who is, if somebody sees me, some people say that I am like looking like my father. I walk like my father. My daughter resembles me. My daughter resembles my husband. All these things people keep telling, right? So that phonemic features, that is the external features, are being seen through epigenetic processes. Genetic processes, you find the innate core qualities of a personality or of emotions, etc., either inherited from father or mother, or father lineage or mother lineage, Epigenetic is something that gets affected because of the environmental changes, because of the environment. This is very crucial to understand the phenomenon. So, for example, one example I will give. So, there is the fourth tribe in Papua New Guinea. This is also called as New Guinea, right? Which is a Latin American country, a rainforest oriented Amazon forest, they call. So, in that there is a tribe called fourth tribe, and this tribe is called they are cannibals. They eat human flesh. They are cannibals. They lived out of cannibalism. And Levi-Strauss calls this cannibalism to two types. One is the endogamous, the other one is the exogamous. If one eats one's own relatives, then it is called endogamous. If one kills the outside another one and eats, then it is called exogamous cannibalism. Anyway, now forget about that. Now come back to cannibalism. Here, one particular cluster of women and children in the fourth tribe in 1950s started developing a particular feature called kuru. They called it as kuru. The scientists have called it as kuru, which means shivering. In their language, shivering. So they were trembling. They were trembling, shivering. They are unable to move keep their limbs in control. So it is a shivering. So people started analyzing, is it because of the DNA or something else? They found out that it is not through DNA that this has happened. They tested the DNA. It is not happening to all. It is not happening to the menfolk. It is not happening to the younger generation. Only to the childs and to the children and to the woman it is happening. Then they have investigated, they taken this and then injected to chimpanzees. And after 1.5 years, they started developing shivering, kuru. Then after that, within 6 months, they are dying. Even humans are dying, chimpanzees are also dying. So this is a peculiar thing. Then they imagined that it is nothing to do with the DNA, but something being injected from outside, and therefore this is happening. So they called the social scientists, the anthropologists, and the other social scientists, sociologists, etc. As a team, they formed and they started observing the whole thing. They found out that in cannibalism, they have a ritual. The dead, deceased relative has to be, his limbs and brain has to be eaten by the people. So they used to cook. Women and children, the men and the young people live outside. They go for hunting, they don't stay in the camps. They come back intermittently, but longer times they stay out. But only the men and children, women and children, they are in the camps with the old people. And when the old person dies, they eat this. This is the problem. So the fellow who got affected with this, the brain that they ate, all people are getting affected. So this is an epigenetic kind of feature. It started changing the whole behavioral patterns of that. Now you go to the next slide. It is a behavioral inheritance system, basically BIS we are talking about. In that BIS, what happens is that it is not only affecting the body, and part of this DNA, it is taking into the biological system. It is not just enough, but it is replicating into cultural forms. The typical example, what we are now seeing is coronavirus or COVID-19 is a typical example for this epigenetic feature. Like, everybody thought that it is a virus created by the animals like bats, etc., Wuhan labs, etc., all that we have seen. Then the alternate medicine, they wanted to find out virus to virus, they wanted to find out a vaccine. So the whole system of things on one side are happening. On the other hand, how to control this? You have to control only through the behavior. Otherwise, inheritance system of COVID keeps on developing. So in order to prevent that inheritance, your inheritance of behavior has to change. So you have the mask, you have distance keeping, you have hand washing, all sorts of things are introduced into this new kinds of system. We have seen the entire culture getting affected with the new manifestations it started developing, including the so-called governments are unable to answer this particular thing. They have relied on your behavioral system. So what is this BIS? BIS is another field where the behavioral system again is studied in the animals. They injected this to the animals first, the antivirus or the virus, COVID, injection is given to the animals, then tested, then it is given to the humans, then it is given to the public. So it goes in that particular chain of reaction. So even in the BIS model, ethologists have started understanding the animal behavior, trying to communicate how this system of inheritance is found also in the human beings. They found turbonic is one great example. Turbonic, which is basically turbone, means culture, animal like squirrel-like animal. The name comes because of that culture, because it has a cultural system inherited, a very intelligent animal. It's like a squirrel, and it has an interesting mating system. It gives a nut to the female. If the female accepts that nut, then mating happens. If it doesn't, no mating happens. Right? So there is a behavioral system of mating that is being given through a particular kind of product, a product called nut. So a cultural system is introduced into the human animal behavior, and therefore culture started emerging. Same thing with the human cultures. You find all rites of passage. You find everything that is all culturally constructed based on what your behavioral inheritance systems. Next, the thing is symbolic system. I'm closing. I'm not getting into the details of that. The symbolic system is basically language. Language itself is a symbolic. Word is a symbol. Word is a symbol. Your writing system is a symbol. Your picture is a symbol. So it is a symbolic system. What happens in the symbolic system of behavior is very interesting. Like onset, your mind also getting affected because of this symbolic system. It structures your mind, your way of thinking, your etc. etc. So language becomes a very. That's why I kept the first slide, the vortex. All your consciousness. See, the Marxist use of consciousness is different from the idealist use of consciousness. For idealists, consciousness means aware of things. Aware of your environment is consciousness. Marx started using it differently. It is not simply awareness, but something to be done with this awareness. Something you want to change to this awareness by the environment, changing the environment. To your own development, you change the environment, and therefore it becomes consciousness. So Marxian consciousness always works on not just awareness plus change. Philosophers have interpreted the world. However, the problem is how to change it. Marxist question. Marx raised this very interesting question. Anyway, now behavior, symbolic system is a system where you started developing language, and language is getting manifested in different forms, and rules are getting formed. Now, next slide, please. I'll close with that slide. So, if you look at this, this is basically this diagram I've taken from Freud, basically the Freudian model of language, causality, language, and images. He takes from that and attributes to dream theory. Now, what happens in DNA, what happens in epigenetic, EIS, and what happens in SIS, and what happens in SIS, all this inheritance system is depending on this formula called dream work. Condensation, displacement, transformation, secondary elaboration. This is what the dream works, right? There are two kinds of dreams. I'm not getting into all the dream theory, but basically your dream or your fiction is out of temporality. Temporality is real, out of the real temporality, right? When you talk about mythic age, we are getting into Puranic age, which is going to centuries back, unimaginable centuries back into the life. Nobody knows how many centuries we have gone back into that mythic age. So there is a mythic time, there is an astronomical time, astrological time, calendrical time, real time. Time is divided into multiple ways. This is what Paul Ricoeur talks about in his concept of time. So it is reflected in multiple ways, and all these multiple ways, when the time changes, also the space has this emplacement he calls. There is a space continuum. There is nothing like spaces we have divided for our convenience, for our understanding, for our cognition, for our observation. We have divided these spaces, but space doesn't exist. That your house is constructed by walls. Remove the walls, what happens? Continuity of the space. So the spaces are constructed for our kind of convenience. Therefore, it is something like condensation, something like displacement, something like transformation, something like secondary elaboration. So all our language system works on this model, and therefore humanities, when I talk about fiction, fiction is like a dream. And dream is like the same work, like of a scientist. Scientist also does the same. Condensation, displacement, secondary laboratory transformation, same thing. Social scientist does. So ultimately, we are all doing the same kind of things. Now, where that we are leading to, the ultimate question of globalization that we are talking about, commodification, not in just terms of everything getting commodified, not in just terms of use value and exchange value alone. If it is to that extent, no problem. What is happening into the cultural field is that it is adding sign value, a symbolic value being added, therefore gradation, hierarchies started taking place. That is the problem for the folk. That is the problem for folklore. So how do we analyze? We have to analyze by, my feeling is that you apply the co-evolution model, where this model is working with animals, with plants and humans simultaneously. If you apply for all these folklore data, including your forms, the so-called quote and unquote verbal and non-verbal forms, in a continuum, in a generic continuum, you find a different result. Thank you very much, sir. I will stop here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Sir, thank you.
Thank you. Now it is the time for the participants to share your views. You can ask questions on both the lectures. It seems they need some more time to come out of that stream.
Sir, I will just say
Yeah,
my-
please.
Good evening, sir. It was really wonderful. In fact, due to network problem, I could only join late, and by then Professor Chellapperumal sir was somewhere in folklore as commodity. Somewhere from there I joined. So the half of the first lecture I'm not much aware. I need to look into the YouTube and listen to. But it was like a summarization of all the 4-5 days thing of Professor Raghavan Payanad, and that was really interesting for the reason that it was maybe recap made me to recollect and again to rethink that how to get connected, how to understand. And with regarding to Professor Vyas Dakaredi sir, mind blowing, but really I am lost in your presentation. It is so interesting, especially the new terms and the way you presented the vocabulary. It's simply nice, but I think that really needs to go back, sir. It's not like it's something like going on, but somewhere going above my head also, like a bounces. But it's very interesting to know how he connected with the evolution and how that has an impact and the changes, and again connecting to the present day, the way we have and how the culture has changed. It was really very interesting. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. Yeah, I understand this co-evolution theory takes 7-8 hours of lecture. I know. But anyway, just to give an idea, that's all.
Sir, this is not as a question. I would like to thank both Chellapperumal sir and Sudhakar Reddy sir. I think our workshop is now taking off in a right way, because both your lecture enhanced our Raghavan Payanad's views. I think we came for a good understanding regarding our discipline, and now we can see a light in which direction will our field, will our discipline will move on. through the past history and through our explanations, sir. Thank you. Thank you for both of you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Reddy, sir. And
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so
thank you,
much.
sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gandhi Subramanian.
I think, sir, I have one doubt. When William Jones, the first president of Royal Asiatic Society, in his presidential address to Royal Asiatic Society, Calcutta by that time, in his presidential speech, he has given three disciplines or departments or compartments rather, which is the through which it is possible for us to find out the genius of Indian system rather. So number one is the philosophy, number two is the history, and number three is the creativity of the people. So these are the three systems that are very important for us in the sense for the British people to explore in India. It was in 1783 or so. So 1780s and 90s. By that time, there was no anthropology or history, anything in India. I didn't know about the foreign. But by that time, later on, what happened? The same William Jones, he wrote an article on the similarities between Sanskrit and other Indo-European languages, and the Grimm's brothers has taken that thread. They collect a lot of information, and they came out with some of the similarities. It's okay. Then when anthropology comes, so here what I say is, William Jones, he was talking about to find out the what you call the expertise within the society. But when anthropology came in the beginning, they were seeing that data from outside rather. So that is what Professor Raghavan Painod is again and again is talking about that point. So that's one thing. Later on, of course, the whole department, it might have changed its what you call epistemological criteria. Said, okay, that's one thing. Because anthropology is directly involved in the study of folklore. So what all is going on in anthropology is having its own what you call the its effect or its influence in the folklore study also. So that's one thing. And in between, sociology department has come in. Even they also concentrating on folklore study. Now, of course, history is having its own boundaries to study the folklore. And now, Professor Sudhakar Reddy is explaining about the what you call pure science on one side, applied science on the other side, which is available in other sciences other than folklore. It seems most of the folklorists are unaware of those systems or theories, especially genes, and this genome project has come in. We have a lot of, I think, the anthropology has taken that trend again. On the basis of the geological connections, they were trying to revisit the what you call a reconstruction of the old group. It is going on. But when the psychology or the mind, it is also is having its own impact on the modern sciences, because brain is, after all, it's only what to say. It is not the what you call hard material, but it is only liquid, which is having, which Sudhakar Reddy has explained it very well, how our memory is there, where that memory is there, how it is coming. So here my point is, as for science and theoretical base is concerned, it's a very well, it's a very good. We have no, what to say, we have no points to raise there. But our point is how this can be applied to the folklore as a data. Because without applying these theories, is it possible to substantiate folkloric data? Because I don't know how to put it. My point is, still we are in with the touch of folklore as a data. You cannot deviate or differentiate data from the discipline. So how these theories can be adopted or given to, my doubt is for both the scholars. And they have given us a very excellent lecture by giving what is going on at the present day in other disciplines also. But how we can adopt, how we can apply to our folklore? I think that also, if you concentrate, it will be very much beneficial to us.
Sir, shall I answer briefly? Shall I answer briefly? Sir, shall I answer it briefly?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are expecting, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Audible, no? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Sir. Now,
Okay.
thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, the very interesting question raised by Professor Bhaktavatsal Reddy. Yes, it is easy to understand in a schematic way all these things, but how to apply it to our own discipline is a very larger issue. What happened with folklore studies is that we are still, it's my personal opinion, I may be pardoned, at least the Indian folkloristics or the Indian studies on folklore, Indians studies on folklore rather, it is still, in my opinion, is at a very surface level. We have not gone very deep into these concepts. Neither we tried with our students the same thing in our theses, etc., etc. That is the major issue. Say, for example, you have one particular theory, Van Sidos's. What is the theory? Theory of what is that? Icotypification. Icotype. Concept of icotype. It is basically a theory that is taken from botany, which I explained in co-evolution theory. The same thing with animals also. Ethology also, it is the same. What is that theory says? If there is an environmental change because of the migration, a tail migrates from one to the other. In the process of migration, if it settles in the other area, locale, and it automatically gets absorbed into the local systems and gives a new feature called as icotype, a different kind of type, right? So this is a very simple kind of thing. And example that one quotes, or even what's his name, Stig Thompson quotes in Star Husband Tale, etc., etc. Interestingly, the same tale of the daughters sleeping outside with mother-in-law and looking at the sky, and you know that Star Husband tale, right? So the forest, the tale was in the forest, and the people were outside the tent or their habitat, and then looking at the stars. The same tale has traveled to the seashores, where a person cannot sleep outside. He has to sleep within the house. Then what happens to the tale? Where does the Star Husband comes from? Whether he comes from the star or through the window through which he is looking into the stars. Where does it come from? So this is the localization of the concept. Now, we have not done enough studies on localization. Our fellows have done a lot of folktales studies, but generally talking about structure, generally talking about literature aspects, so on and so forth, but never gone into the very migration of the tale itself. And so too for mythologies, so too for what is known as folk song tradition. If you look at the that folk song tradition by Alan Lomax, a wonderful thesis he has produced. It's a huge project run for almost 30 years. Everything is computerized, through which they are able to understand which particular phrase is reflected in a particular body movement or a dance pattern, etc., is combinedly studied. So one has to do it in a holistic process. Then only one can understand it. By surface level, pausing on comments doesn't make a research. Like the scientists, we have not done that, and therefore the lacuna comes. So application involves in what is known as within the field of study. You have to fix your boundaries, never to get out. If you want to do structural study, just confine to structural study. Look at the structures. If you want to do it diachronic, from where time, which place it has come through migration, everything, you do that. If it is a performance studies, look at just the performance. What happens with that performance? And within the corpus of that repertoire of that particular performance, what happens to that particular phenomenon? We are not doing this kind of thing. So application comes not with the data, but the data which we are using, the data with which we are working. That is most crucial. So one has to first of all understand what is data. Now still the 19th century model of data is out there. It's wrong. Folklore is not out there. It is within us. That is what Alan Denders at the end of the days he was telling. We are the folk. You and me are in the civilized world are folk. In the sense that when I go to the field, I am interacting. The data comes because of the interaction. That's what Dan Ben Amos says. That's what all the postmodern, new ethnographers say. New ethnology, new ethnography. All that people say that it is in the dialogical process that the data comes in. So it is not out there. There is nothing out. There is nothing like a song. You go and ask for it in their language, they tell it. Analytical genre might be song, but for them, that song is not song. It is just a morning kind of ritual. A morning ritual in which certain things are uttered into a rhythmic pattern. Sounds are uttered in a rhythmic pattern. So it is for them a morning kind of song. If it is a morning song, then it has a different function altogether. We have not studied in that particular application of the data. And the data comes only in interaction, especially in folklore. There lies the problem. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that is true, sir. But my point is rather, in India, as we all know, folklore is a part of the literature department. And still, or in most of the cases, still people are concentrating, scholars are concentrating on origin theories only. They have not come out of that. And where anthropology influence is there in the department, of course, they have come to the what we call evolution again, the other part of evolution. Because of Lurdusa in Tamil Nadu, they have concentrated mostly on the structural theories. Yeah, so both of you said, so there is so much of a development at the theoretical level in the folklore. But when that kind of vast knowledge can be, what to say, will be near to our scholars in India. So that is the point which I would like to raise. Because so much of thinking is going on in the folklore discipline at outside. That is why it is only multidisciplinary, if not interdisciplinary. But still, but how to make it more familiarized with the scholars of the folklore. So that's the point which I would like to raise. It's only application part rather.
Okay, you are talking about application of pedagogy. So it's a pedagogical issue that you are raising, right? Training people or disciplining the discipline by the discipline, that is the student. So this is a different kind of arena. The problem with the Indian academics, sir, I tell you, basically because I've seen for almost 35 years of this in this field of teaching and cheating. I know basically what we are doing. They basically, sir, our students have this problem of reading. Whereas in the West, they give only books. These fellows have to read the books, come up with whatever reviews about that book, and come and discuss with the teacher. That is missing. Ours is the Gurukula system, typical Gurukula system. What I teach in the classroom, that is being vomited as a notes. They write that as a notes and then vomited in the exam. So our system doesn't actually leading us to the very serious application of pedagogy. That is the major problem with us. Problem with us is only we are distributing degrees, not knowledge. I'm sorry to say that. Your PhD is also postponement of employment. Most of our research scholars, they come because they don't have a job. It's a postponement of employment, and UGC has encouraged postponement of employment by giving a lot of fellowship to that. Ultimately, where we are leading our, I have a lot of criticism to make on higher education and the education policy. This is the problem with pedagogy. Thank you.
No, that is the point where Professor Raghavan is trying to concentrate. See, it is the deductive that is, important or more necessary when compared to inductive. So you would like to, I think in his lecture he is going to take up those two things also. When we are applying this theory, we are only just trying to what to call insert our data within that framework, but not the other way. Then if that is the case, how to come out of that? So that is the, no, these are the, out of this, what personal I feel is, I think we need another debate for 2 to 3 days on some of the concepts. Then only we can think about its application as per folklore data in India. We need not bother about other countries, So I think we will take up that point. I think let us have a kind of clear idea about the folklore concept. Yes, we all know, in the most of the cases, all these foreign theories, application of foreign theories is in a way, it's an indigestion of the, or indigestive, what to call, understanding of those theories. Because if we see now, how, because they have not seen the theories directly. In the sense that they don't have the, what to call, the data or the concepts known to them directly. It has been transported to some scholars. So what all they say, it has been adopted. In most of the cases, they have the, especially prop. Prop is one of the folklorists which has been adopted by most people. But unfortunately, one chapter is known to most of the Indian scholars. But the other chapter is more important, where he is talking about the culture. So culture is the criteria to understand the lacuna in the surface level of the folktale. And at that point, we are not dealing. Why? Because we didn't have much data on that theory. But now it is not the case. We have a lot of data available on the internet. Only thing is to show them a way to approach such items from origin theories to the most modern genome concept. Okay, I think both of you have done excellent job. Sir, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
I request the participants. Yeah. Participants, another 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. Ruchi Rana this side.
Okay.
Thank you, Sudhakar Reddy sir and Chella Perumal sir, for the wonderful lecture. It's always a delight to listen to both of you. My question is to Sudhakar Reddy sir. Sir, you just mentioned that folklore data, always exist in interaction. What if that interaction is interrupted, like we are seeing in today's world? What if the medium that you talked about, that is very important, is transformed? As researchers, how what is the boundary that we need to draw to explore such a change, and also how much we can explore? We need to be very careful about limitations as well as how much we can explore.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to answer briefly. There are two issues actually. One is folklore as data, quote and unquote. It exists in what sense? For folklore, for folk, it is their lore or it is their manifestations of whatever it is, behavioral, etc., connected with their life. So that exists even without us. It exists. The data is there with them. That information is there with them, right? The problem here is that we are translating that data into an academic data, into a new knowledge system, where what Professor Raghavan Painadu was telling is that this knowledge is only a practice, but whereas what I am producing is a knowledge which can actually act upon to change. It can inflict a change. It can make a change. It can transform a change. So this is the area that an academician is working. So see, in postmodern folklore, one has to understand there are multi-layers, right? There are 3, 4, 5 layers. It could be n number of layers, but I'm saying it is a layered kind of data. The primary level, you find folk and their lore in their lifestyles manifested in different spheres of walks of life. That is data for them. That is their life. Now, in the secondary level, there are researchers. Before that researchers, in the secondary level, within the folk, there are somebody called specialists. Someone called specialist within the folk. Say, for example, bards. They are a specialist of folk singers, right? So, shamans, specialists of medicinal practitioners, so on and so forth. In folk culture also, there are specialists within the folk. They are regarded for their functions differently for different times, right? In one sense, in the aham kind of structure, if you look at, the mother becomes a folklorist in the sense that she has the specialist knowledge to transfer it to the younger, so on and so forth. So it all depends on these layers. The second layer within the folk is, the upper layer is the specialist layer. Now the third layer is that the academician layer, the researcher layer. Now the researcher is taking the data. He has the option to take data either from the specialist level or from the lower level. In either way he can take, and the way he takes the data, the way he gets the interpretation or analysis, right? Analysis, as Raghavan Painadu sir stated very clearly, it is nothing but you are converting the data into numericals, into tables, into categories, right? That is what the analysis is. So we are uniting them. We are uniting this data and conveniently arranging this data. See, what Arnold Toynbee, I'm reminded of again Arnold Toynbee. Don't worry about interpretation. Worry about data. Worry about fact. What is a historical fact? You simply worry about that fact. Don't bother about the interpretation. Interpretation comes according to Arnold Toynbee, the way you organize your data, the way you scheme your data. You make the data appear in a particular style, form. Your interpretation emerges, right? This is what the grounded theory also talks about. Grounded theory is data emerges, the interpretation emerges, theory emerges within the data from the field. Ground theory, same thing. Arnold Toynbee said it in the very early 1920s. where a student of history, I read much of his writings. I was influenced much by his writing. So what I understood is that yes, it is there. That kind of data is also there. So what kind of data that this fellow is working? The higher another level of fellows who are working with the folk, trying to convert this folklore for a multiple use, a different use, mass media or cultural industry, etc., is another level. So they are also working with the data, either through the social scientists or the folklorists or by themselves. Inviting the folk fellow, tuning them, the cinema fellows, what they are doing. One cinema fellow came, one music director came, Koti and Raj Koti. He came to our center asking for some, folk songs. Well, of course, we cannot give folk songs just like that to these commercial fellows. We said that you listen, that's all, and take your notation, nothing. And he did it, and then they wanted to put that tunes into their film. So most of these things are done by themselves, coming to either to us or to the folk, right? So most of these folklore, these specialists are nowadays getting awards, Padma Shri, etc., by whom? Through this middlemen. So middlemen always act as a kind of folklorist or the so-called the specialists within the folk, and they become also problematic to the data. How your Mudiyatu has become, or your what you call that round dance has become a UNESCO recognized intangible heritage. It is because of the middlemen, not by the folk, not by the practitioners themselves. It is somebody like Jayarajan or Rajagopalan who made a series of contacts with those organizations and then bringing them, making them to understand this. And so what is that? So we are creating a new kind of folklore by these means. Therefore, the new data also is there with us. So which data we are talking is very crucial. So are you talking about the data interacting with the folk and the scholar, or interaction of the cultural media or the mass media or some others with the folk, or the folk with the specialists? Which layer of the data we are talking is the crucial question for folklore. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So shall we conclude here?
Yes,
Or
sir.
is there any other question? Okay. Okay, please.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Sudhakar sir. It was a very informative session. I have a question, sir, regarding folklore in its performative context as a product, and a product which is consumed by the folk group itself, because the kind of, I think, like what I have grasped through the lecture series we have from Raghavan Panat sir all these days, and from you, that even a folk group in its performative context, isn't it a product in itself which is created by the folk group, because how they conceive the surrounding themselves and their worldview, how they represent it to the other people, and how that product, when taken by other people, because when we talk about characteristics of folklore as well, and I think it also becomes important here, that when we talk about characteristics, then the major thing that differentiate folklore from mass culture or pop culture is the idea of anonymity, for me, the idea of ownership, because folklore has always been part of a folk group and not necessarily a person. So so I always wonder about this phenomena where folklore as in its performative context, where it is product, but taken by some other person or some other folk artist and used in a very different way creatively, and created as a as a different product, and then how we differentiate as folk analysts or folklorists when we take the same data and create it into our own product. For an example, I don't know if I'm making sense. I'll give you a very simple example. When like for an example, a Mithila painting, which is a folk painting, if a specific artist making it into a painting which is presented in a gallery with a certain name, with an authorship, and Mithila as performed in a village by a group of people, which gets passed on from generation to generation without any ownership tag to it. How that painting in the museum is different from when I as folklorist go to conduct a study on that painting and make my own product. So from that museum to the library.
Yeah, I can be brief already.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's just that all
45.
these things doesn't make a very concrete and a very structured thought. And also, I know that there are a few details as which I'm missing, but this is how I like this lecture specifically is making my thoughts towards that direction. So I'm just asking about how we the consumption of product folklore and folklore studies, how are they two different things? Like, I think
Sir, Chella sir, you want to respond? Professor Chella sir, want to respond, or otherwise I will. You please.
It is
You are silent all the time.
9:45.
No, I think now we will conclude here. The Professor Samala.
Thought it will go endlessly. So I'm tired. I don't
She is
want.
not there. Yeah, Professor Venkatesh. If both
Sir, I am
of them
here,
are
sir.
not. Yeah, please.
Just one word, sir. Before conclusion,
Yes,
just
sir.
one word. Just one word before conclusion. Yeah, the
Okay.
question that raised by, I don't know, Himanshi. Yeah, okay, it's Himanshi. Okay. Yeah, that's a very good point that you have raised. Now the explanation can be very elaborate, which I don't want to do it. Already time constraint is there. Now the issue that you are raising is something to do with very performative kind of stuff, right? So the context, which context it is done, right? Example is wrong. Your example of this thing is wrong, but product, whether it is used as a product or used as a commodity by within the community. Within the community, they have the use value, also exchange value, right? So within the community, it can be a commodity, not necessarily outside community. Outside community, anyway, it becomes like commodity, but within the value, or within the community also, it can be a commodity. If it is so, if it is a commodity within the thing, then our analysis will be when it is getting transformed into exchange value. The attribute of exchange value is a must phenomena to observe. Then only you can comment on that particular. So it is the context that makes that performance meaningful. To whom? Question is to whom? So this is a larger question. Anyway, it's a larger question, but several layers of units which need to be observed. Then only one can come to conclusion. Thank you very much.
yeah, thank you, sir.
Sir, myself, Dr. Sujoy Kumar Mandal, Professor.
Yeah, no, already.
Okay. You conclude. Okay.
Say, thing is, tomorrow you can raise, so no problem.
Okay,
After,
sir. Okay.
9 o'clock, if you need, you can interact, no problem. They will be with us. Because our connection, it is already for 2 hours. We have taken 50 minutes to 45 minutes.
Okay,
so
sir.
we conclude here. And we are very much thankful to Professor Chella Perumal and Professor Sudhakar Reddy for their thought-provoking lectures. And it shows how much we need to do to be in the field of folklore. So for that, And there is ample time. Tomorrow onwards, we can continue the discussion. Shamala, you just propose vote of thanks with the 1 or 2 sentences.
Sir, I profusely thank the today's August speakers, Professor Chella Perumal sir and Professor Y.A. Sudhakar Reddy sir, for their scholarly talk on the deliberations of the workshop. I thank all the participants for their active participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Hello, Shiv Kumar ji. Shiv Kumar ji,
Sir,
you
sir,
can come.